Okay, how many people do we currently have?
We have 26.
26. Okay, they still trickling in or no?
A little bit.
Okay, I'll wait about 30 more seconds and then we'll begin. Okay, how many people do we currently have?
We have 28.
26. Okay, they still trickling in or no?
A little bit.
I'll wait about 30 more seconds, then we'll begin. IT, I'm hearing feedback.
Yeah, that was the feedback from the YouTube live stream. I've muted it now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and begin in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, hello, my name is Eddie Cummins. I'm the Smart General Manager, and I'm happy to have everyone here tonight. Tonight's listening session is on extensions. Here's tonight's overview. We'll go over just a few listening session ground rules, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bill Gamlin, who's going to provide an extensions update. And then we're going to dive into planning for the future. In that area, I'll provide a little feedback about SMART strategic planning process, and then we will open it up to get your feedback and comments on future extensions. There are multiple ways for you to share your feedback. You can share your thoughts in the Zoom meeting tonight. You can take a survey on ridership, pathways, extensions, and freight at sonoma-marin-train.org/planning-for-the-future, or you can simply go to the Sonoma-Marin train.org website and click on the link on the homepage. You can also send an email to extensionsinput@sonoma-marin-train.org. And if you'd like to provide feedback on other elements such as ridership, pathways, or freight, you can choose one of those email addresses as well. So just a few listening session ground rules. Stay focused on the question at hand. We have 5 questions tonight to keep us on track. Be future focused. What can SMART do to improve its performance moving forward? Ask everyone to keep an open mind, be respectful of others' ideas and thoughts. This is like a brainstorming session, so there are no bad ideas and no bad comments. We truly want to hear your feedback. And then we just ask everyone to allow time for others to speak. Last I heard, we had 26 people on this Zoom meeting. And so we're just asking everyone to follow the 2-minute rule. We definitely want to hear your feedback, thoughts, and opinions, but please do it within 2 minutes for each one of your comments. And before I turn this over to Bill Gamlin, I just want to be very, very clear. Tonight's session is not about checking a box to say that we received public comment. This is your system. I want to hear your thoughts and opinions. And, you're going to be heard. You're going to help us to create our strategic plan moving forward. And so I just ask everybody to, openly share with what you think we ought to do moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bill Gamlin. Bill?
Thank you, Eddie. So we'll give you a high-level overview of the extensions of the smart passenger rail and pathway systems. We can start with the next slide, Eddie. So we have 4 extensions that are still in various states of being implemented: Windsor, Healdsburg, Cloverdale, and then a bigger vision from a system from Novato to Sassoon. And I'm going to talk about each one of these. Next slide. So the Windsor extension is a 3-mile extension from our station at Airport Boulevard in northern Santa Rosa, unincorporated Sonoma County. It includes the passenger rail extension as well as a pathway extension through that whole alignment. It includes a new platform at the historic looking Windsor Depot building. You can see it there in the photo. A brand new smart park and ride lot. About 130 spots in that lot are planned, kind of kitty corner to the station. And we have already begun construction on this segment that started in 2020. Unfortunately, it's on hold currently, and that's due to some of our funding being challenged in court. And we received some regional Measure 3 bridge toll funding, and the court dispute there is whether that's a user fee or a tax. It had been an appeal upheld twice, but the state Supreme Court agreed to hear that case in October. So that put a hold on our funding for the balance of the work. So that's where that is right now. Next slide, we'll take a look at Healdsburg. The Healdsburg extension is a 5-mile extension. It includes the passenger rail system and pathway. It too will have a new station platform in Healdsburg. We envision a park and ride lot with that as well. And status on this is that it's funding dependent. So we did some preliminary engineering work back in 2009, 2010, but haven't done anything with that since. The next extension is Cloverdale. This is much longer, about 17 miles to get up to Cloverdale. Also, extension of the passenger rail system, pathway as well. It will include a new station in Cloverdale, which has mostly been constructed. You can see it in the photo there, as well as the park and ride lot. So we'll probably make some modifications to that as part of the project. And the Cloverdale extension too is funding dependent. Next slide. And then we have the Novato to Sassoon project. This is a 46-mile line comparable to our current smart system. It would go from Novato to Sassoon, where it would make a connection to the Capitol Corridor, would include new stations, new trains, possibly what we're using in the system now, possibly different technology. None of that's been determined. And this really came about as the state included it in the 2018 state rail plan as a connection to better improve mobility throughout California. They provided some funding, and we did a very high-level feasibility study in 2019. It looked at the existing infrastructure, generally what kind of improvements would have to be made. It did not get into a lot of detail like operational planning or ridership projections. So high-level study, that's available on our website if anyone's interested in looking at it. We're currently not really doing much with that at all. And we put together this timeline just to give people a little flavor of the work that's been accomplished to date and some of the things that we're looking forward on. Starting at the beginning in 2008, when the voters approved Measure Q, was the quarter-cent sales tax that funded SMART. That led to design effort through 2009 and into 2011. We advertised our first construction contract, a design build contract, where the contractor completes the design and then builds the work in 2011. That was initially just a 35-mile piece of work from Civic Center in San Rafael to downtown Santa Rosa, included 7 stations. That was during the great financial recession, and we received very favorable bids. In fact, so good we were able to negotiate a couple extra stations in there, Novato, Atherton, and Guerneville Road in Santa Rosa. We awarded that contract in 2012 and started construction later that year. During that time, we were able to secure some funding for an extension north to the airport, where we added another station at Airport Boulevard. And then in 2015, we were put into President Obama's budget for the Larkspur extension. This was a federal grant that had about half of our funding for the 2-mile extension from downtown Santa Fe to Larkspur. In 2017, service began, and by that point, you can see we'd leveraged our 35 miles up to 42 miles, 10 stations, downtown Santa Rafael to Airport Boulevard. During that time, we secured grants for the Windsor extension and started doing preliminary engineering and permitting for that project. And then that leads us from 2019, which in December, we started service to the Novato downtown station and the Larkspur extension. So we got to generally our ultimate southern terminus. In 2020, January, we rolled out a whole new schedule, 38 weekday trips, 10 weekend trips in that schedule. And then in 2020, we also began construction on the Windsor extension. And that got us to our pause at the end of 2020. I like to say we were cautiously aggressive in the Windsor project, aggressive in the sense that we were moving forward, getting things done, getting permitted, and getting some construction done with the funding we had to work with, but cautious in the sense that we did limited notice to proceeds with our contractor and focused on work constraints, completing work that had permit restrictions in it, so that when we do resume, we're in a very good place to wrap that project up. We are continuing to look for grants for the Windsor extension, not the Larkspur extension there. And we have secured partial grants on that despite the other funding being tied up in court. And we, of course, are constantly looking for grant opportunities and pushing forward for the Healdsburg extension and the Cloverdale extension. We don't have any time certain on that right now, but there are placeholders out there that we're working towards. Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that. Now we'll go in and look at planning for the future. I wanted to just talk a little bit about the planning model that staff and the board have been using. Many of you have seen this over time. We've really been talking about this model quite a bit lately, but it really started with a SWOT analysis, and I'll show that SWOT analysis on the next slide. But that was really internal to identify the agency's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that laid the foundation for the board to really get involved and establish a mission and a vision statement, and then identify our strategic objectives. That's where we are today. If you look at this, we're in between objectives and goals. And before we started, working on developing goals and developing a strategy, deploying a strategy, so on and so forth, we wanted to make sure that we heard from the public, just to get your opinions and thoughts that would help us really identify those items that we need to set as goals and make sure that your thoughts and ideas are a part of our strategies moving forward. Here's the SWOT analysis. This is the full SWOT analysis. I don't want to go through the whole thing because it's really all encompassing, but I really wanted to just focus, and I highlighted just a few items in yellow here that I think really lay the groundwork and talk about, extensions. And so number one, on our strengths, we've been successful at identifying and securing funds. That's going to be critical as we move forward and continue to extend our system. Over on the weaknesses side, public perception and local support. I'm out talking all the time. I'm out meeting people, and I hear it all the time. Measured Q, Smart promised in Measured Q that passed in 2008 that they would get to Cloverdale. That hasn't happened. And, that's a thing. And so I want to make sure that we continue to talk about this. We continue to be out talking with the public and letting them know what the plan is moving forward and how we plan to achieve our objectives. That goes right in line on the opportunities of increased interaction with the public and community leaders. Again, I think it's just important to be out talking to people, letting them know where we're at, showing them the progress that we're making, letting people know the challenges that we're experiencing. And over on the threats, one of the big items is the extensions north of Windsor and east of Novato are not in the Plan Bay Area 2050 plan. And what that means is that really limits our ability to compete for grants, makes it difficult to get state funds, and it makes it nearly impossible to get federal funds. So that's been a big challenge for us. Also, there's been ongoing litigation slowing projects. Bill spoke to that a little bit. Public trust and confidence. It's everybody knows that smart sales tax expires in 2029. And in order for us to continue to move on and move forward, we have to get a sales tax initiative passed in the future. And I think that that's going to be dependent a lot on public trust and confidence. And then last but not least in there is nothing's getting any cheaper. Capital and operating costs continue to rise as time goes on. Another thing that I shared with the board as we were working through this process is what I call the frequently asked questions. You know, as I've been out, you know, getting to know people in the community and speaking, I seem to get the same questions over and over and over again. Again, I won't read them all, but in red, I just have a few that I think are pertinent to extensions. And the first question there is, what's the holdup with the Windsor extension? I hear that one all the time. How long will we get to Healdsburg and Cloverdale? Is SMART planning to go east? These are questions that I think as we go through this process, we need to be able to answer, we need to be able to talk about, and we need to have a strategy to be able to achieve these goals. So the board took all this information and they created what we call the SMART house. It starts with the foundation, the values, safety, integrity, stewardship, continuous improvement. The pillars of our house are our strategic objectives of ridership, pathways, extensions, and freight. Our ceiling is our mission statements as we connect communities. And what that really means is that SMART provides safe, reliable, and environmentally responsible transportation options. And then the roof of our house is our vision. And what the board came up with was smarter transportation for a smarter future. And what that means is SMART envisions an innovative transportation system that provides integrated mobility solutions, promotes sustainable growth, and enhances quality of life. I also wanted, you know, I mentioned this earlier, but I want the public to be very clear that I understand what Measure Q is about and what it says. And I just want to read it. The background findings: the Sonoma-Marin Area Rail Transit District SMART was created to provide passenger rail system along the Northwestern Pacific Railroad within Sonoma and Marin counties. The entire 75-mile corridor is publicly owned and can be used to provide passenger rail service. SMART will provide passenger rail service and bicycle pedestrian pathway to 14 rail stations in Sonoma and Marin counties. SMART is committed to providing service with the most environmentally clean passenger rail vehicles possible. SMART requires this measure in order to provide matching revenues to existing state and federal transportation grants to bond for the construction of the project and to provide funding for the ongoing operation and maintenance of the project. You know, that goes on, Section 3, purpose. This ordinance is adopted to achieve the following among other purposes and directs that the provisions hereof be interpreted in order to accomplish those purposes. A, to provide funding for the design, construction, implementation, operation, financing, maintenance, and management of a passenger rail system and bicycle pedestrian pathway connecting the 14 rail stations from Cloverdale to Larkspur. And so again, why do I bring this up? Because this is one that I hear a lot of thoughts and opinions on, and I just wanted the public to know that I very much understand what this says and what was talked about back during Measure Q in 2008. So now for the good part. This is where we open it up to you. As you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 questions up here. I'd really like to stay focused. You know, if we start with that first question, talking about the North, and then we'll move on. But as you answer these questions, really, I'd like to stay focused on each one of these questions. And then, of course, we'll move forward. And that last question down at the bottom really opens it up and allows you to provide any feedback that you would like to provide that maybe doesn't fit into any of these questions. So I will start with the first question, and then we'll open it up to the floor. As SMART plans for extensions to the north, what are the factors that we should consider? An example are things like ridership, operating and construction costs, types of trips, schedule, frequency, fares, bus connections, or any other thing that you think that we ought to think about. So with that, let's open it up and see what folks' feedback is.
Okay, our first attendee is Mike Pechner.
Oh, great.
Good evening, Mr. Gamlin and Mr. Eddie Cummins. I'm sure you've heard this before from Mike Strider. I worked with him when I was on the worked for the Northwestern Pacific Railroad. I'm not sure of the procedure on this and whether SMART is able to get loans from banks, something like that. I understand there's not a clear path to that, but I'm sure you know as a railroader yourself in Utah that we could use the rail, the ribbon rail that was taken out of that portion of the track from north of Santa Rosa to Windsor, put it back and with all new ties, and it could the passenger service could be operated at 59 miles an hour in dark territory, and that would save not only a lot of money but get the extension to Windsor and Healdsburg at a faster rate. And I know that there are people out there that are wishing for concrete ties and that type of thing, but it seems to me that in the interim, this would appeal to those folks that are dead set against the tax extension because we have not gotten to Windsor or Healdsburg, and also it'd save money in the short run, and then you could go back and put in concrete ties afterwards. So that's just my suggestion. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but there's one way to get there, and also at the same time finish up the pedestrian bike path. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Next, we have Carolyn J.
Carolyn, are you on mute?
Uh,
Oh, there you are. Oh, now you're on mute.
Unmuted. Can you hear
There
me
you
now?
go. We can hear you.
Great. Hi. Hi again.
Hey.
I feel like this has been the smart train week for me. First, I wanted to thank you for the background. You know, we all kind of hear these pieces come up with all of how this started, so that was really helpful. So speaking to the first question, what are the factors that we should consider? I raised the question on an earlier call this week. How many people know how many people live in Cloverdale? Less than 10,000 or more than 10,000? Does anyone know? I guess everybody's muted. So
Right.
the answer is 8,000. Healdsburg, I questioned a few people, some friends about this. There are 11,000 people in Healdsburg and there are 25,000 in Windsor. I did some work. My background is in financial modeling. I'm retired and I'm sort of an economics aficionado. And so I looked at some economic data again, and I'm seeing a negative population growth in all three of those cities, which I think is interesting, about 2 to 2.5%, depending on the city. So I was brainstorming with a friend of mine who's a retired professor from marketing, and she and I came up with the idea, you know, have you thought about doing a trial run with maybe van pools to see how many people who live in these cities would actually use SMART and, you know, go to the STS station from these cities and get an idea of ridership. And that's what I'm wondering. The other thing is our largest population is Santa Rosa. And I'm wondering if you can also include, if you were to do a trial run, maybe something with Department of Transportation van pools, which were a way that people got around. I mean, I've been commuting since 2011 to Oakland and other cities in my career. So van pools are very low cost ways to create test runs for extensions. So that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn.
Next, we have L. Willard Richards.
I favor ultimately extending SMART to, rail service to Ukiah. And also I favor extending rail service to Cloverdale by and by. The strategic plan prepared for the previous election proposed that grants be found to build the smart extension from Healdsburg to Cloverdale, but also contained within the proposal funding for operation of SMART, and that was an annual cost of $177,000 a year. A lot of bus service can be operated for that kind of funding. And as pointed out here just before me, there are not many people in Cloverdale. I would like to have considered the possibility that SMART would propose electric bus service from the northern end of SMART operations to Cloverdale, and to include in that service several stops within town so that people can easily walk to the bus rather than having to get to the existing station, which was shown in the introduction. It's south of town and not an easy walk for most people. So my proposal is that the people in Cloverdale be surveyed to find out whether they would prefer to have that bus service begin right away or to have SMART begin serving Cloverdale when it's able to begin, when it's able to secure the funding and complete the construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Willard.
Next is Anthony Nachor.
Perfect. Hi, good evening. Well, first of all, congratulations, Eddie, for being the new GM for SMART. I am really looking forward to working with you. Even though that I live in Novato, I've ridden the SMART train between Larkspur and Santa Rosa myself. So for your question regarding Northern Extension to Windsor, Healdsburg, and Cloverdale, my first consideration, as brought up by an earlier commenter, was the population demographics for Healdsburg and Cloverdale, with Cloverdale having less than 10,000 people. So my consideration would be, number one, the schedule and frequency. It can be lower than the existing SMART train network unless there is, sufficient ridership to justify sending trains every 30 to 60 minutes up north. And at the same time, if we are to deal with bus connections, maybe we can also talk to Sonoma County Transit and Mendocino Transit Authority to adjust their bus services accordingly so that Mendocino Transit Authority can terminate their service at Cloverdale SMART rather than going all the way out to Santa Rosa, while at the same time, Sonoma County Transit could continue providing complimentary bus service between Cloverdale and Santa Rosa with the Route 60. So if we were to say that we're going to deal with schedule and frequency, maybe we can also throw in the idea of weekend adventures up to Sonoma Valley, wherein you can have your wine tasting. So a la the Napa Valley wine train concept. So the trains that you have right now with the bar and everything, you can have all sorts of events that are related to the towns in Healdsburg and Cloverdale, so that we can attract more weekend riders up that area rather than relying on the cars and reduce traffic along Highway 101. I mean, that's about it for now, but I'm going to provide more input as we go along. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So just let me make sure I got that. So you're in favor of building to Cloverdale, but you would like to see us look at a lower level of service, lower level
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
frequency?
definitely. Like a start off, like the service. Think of a la Caltrain to Gilroy for the time being, so that you can keep your running costs, within a reasonable, think of it like running it within a reasonable, reasonable, budgeting. So basically, with a lower, a population, then there is an expectation of lower ridership, and running trains throughout the entire line can be very expensive to begin with. So definitely, we're gonna need to look into budgeting, so we can start with a lower, a frequency first, and see where the train can improve, so that we can attract even more riders to the trains, especially going further north. There are not that many residents and potential riders to connect to the smart train, unless we know there is already like a solid connection available to to places like Cloverdale, Healdsburg, and the Windsor. I mean, we can do frequent service to Windsor, but we'll definitely need to keep our budget in check for the time being.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate the
Yeah.
clarification.
Yeah.
Next, we have Dave Burns.
Hi there. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. I wasn't sure if my mic was going to work on this computer. So I guess I don't have a lot to say. As I'm just a Cloverdale resident that rides the train down to San Rafael. And right now I'm driving down to Santa Rosa, and I feel like, I realize this is a business, but I feel like it's also a public utility and should be treated as such. And so I would appreciate it if we could get a construction all the way up to Cloverdale, because I think that even those of us who aren't commuting like myself would still be using it. I think that there are a lot of people who go down to Santa Rosa often and would like to be able to go use those businesses, and be able to communicate back and forth would make it much easier for them. I guess I don't really have a lot of ideas as to how to solve that, but I think that I just wanted to put my 2 cents in, saying that I would appreciate it. I know a lot of other individuals who would appreciate it if we could continue that construction up to Cloverdale sooner rather than later.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback.
You're welcome.
Next is Steve Bertelbaugh.
Thank you. Good afternoon or good evening. I think the question of going to Cloverdale and to Willits is not a matter of whether, but when. And there are 2 issues as I see it. One is the cost of getting there, putting in the tracks and so forth. The other is the cost of operating. I think the cost of getting there does depend on whether you're going to use the standards that we have now from Airport Road south. That is concrete ties, ribbon track, and so forth, or whether we have a gradual approach using basically the existing rails, upgrading the ties and under and roadbed and so forth. And then as population increases and ridership grows, upgrading it. And I think we ought to look not only at the population that lives in Cloverdale, but that people commute from Mendocino County, and they would probably, they're now driving, they'll probably use the train if it's available. I think the original plan that's in the environmental study counted on perhaps 4 trips a day to Cloverdale. I tried to look it up and couldn't find the page. So that was the expectation from the beginning. But I think if we look at this from a framework of when we go rather than whether we're going to go, it's going to make a lot more sense. And freight customers in Willits and in Cloverdale or around Cloverdale may well justify putting in freight service, which would justify a good deal of the track work. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
Next is Dan Bell.
Good evening. Regarding the northern extension, I think there are two questions I think need to be answered just for clarification. One would be, if the RM3 funding is ultimately approved by the California Supreme Court, is there enough money available to actually complete the Windsor extension? And my second question is, bridge over Russian River at Healdsburg, would that bridge need to be replaced?
Bill, do you want to speak to that real quick?
Sure. To your first question, if the RM3 funding is approved, then yes, we would have a full funding plan for the Windsor extension. And second, the Healdsburg Bridge, much of that bridge dates back to the early 20th century. It's pretty much beyond its useful life. So we're looking at that as a complete replacement.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Next is Jack Swearingen.
Hello, Eddie.
Hello.
I think you've probably heard from me on this point, and I'd like to see if I can intersect with the previous commentators, both pro and against extending smart service to Cloverdale. I have to confess up front that my goal is to put butts in seats on the smart train, as you have in your less polite moments have said we need to do. I think there's a synergy between tourism and freight that we haven't yet really looked at. In particular, there almost certainly is a freight market to Willits. Now, you've made it clear that your goal right now is much more near term than rebuilding the line to Willits to get freight from those lumber yards that are up there. And I understand that, but maybe we can do both. Maybe there are grants to be had from the FRA and STB for rebuilding freight lines that can also admit SMART on its right-of-way as far as Willits, but maybe Ukiah, and maybe only Cloverdale. But by building to Willits with a grant for freight operations, who's to say we can't run SMART as far as the tracks allow, especially Cloverdale, but maybe even Ukiah, maybe even Willits in the future. So I think that the idea of getting off the SMART trains at some short station like Airport or Windsor or somewhere else is a mode change that people just resist. If they want to be on the train, they want to be on the train. They don't want to switch from van to bus to train or anywhere. They just don't want to do it. And I'm among them, I can understand that. Riding a train is fun. Riding a van or a bus on the freeway is not. So we might as well go with our strength and say, let's see if we can get them on the train. With regard to the population of Cloverdale, I've made this point, and we've jockeyed back and forth with Friends of Smart and others. And that is, the population in Cloverdale is modest, but on the other hand, nobody lives in Disneyland either. but people go there by droves. So we're talking tourism now. And if we have a train through the wine country, especially on up into perhaps Mendocino, if you build it, they will come, I really think. And I think now, building it now, because if we wait, the tracks will be almost certainly paved over, removed and or paved over for the Great Red River Trail. It's got to be both and it's got to be planned for now. Freight to Willits could be the ticket to getting passengers to Cloverdale. That's my point, and thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Next, we have Mike.
That's Mike Arnold. I guess I didn't put the name in there. Sorry about that. Eddie, I think it's important that when you talk about Plan Bay Area and the fact that the MTC did not put this extension to Cloverdale in the plan, is you need to speak to why they didn't, which is in a letter to Farhad and is published online in a comment letter that I provided the board, which is it did not meet cost benefit criteria. Neither extension did. And what this raises is directly relevant to the question that you're asking in this particular slide, which is there has never been a cost benefit analysis done of these extensions. And if they were done, my going in position, but I'm willing to be proven wrong, my going in position is you're just going to generate a lot of cost and you're not going to generate a lot of ridership in either case. And that kind of analysis has been missing from the SMART project from the get-go, leading to the conflict that you cite at the beginning of this meeting when you read Measure Q, which is they made political promises to Northern Sonoma County voters that they would extend the rail all the way to Cloverdale, and there was nothing mentioned about economic criteria. But now, when the rubber hits the road and MTC staff is looking at all these different projects around the region, they say these projects don't qualify. And I think it's important that when you talk about the Plan Bay Area and the fact that these projects aren't in it, you explain to the board and the public how they made that decision. Now, maybe their cost benefit analysis was cruddy. I don't know, I haven't seen it. I don't know the details of the cost benefit models that they used, but it seems to me if you want to address the voter concerns that were expressed explicitly in Measure I, you're going to have to deal with the issue of costs and benefits, because a key criteria in that campaign was SMART was spending too much money on the riders it was taking. And if SMART suddenly invests hundreds of millions of dollars to get to a town that's only got 8,000 people, I guarantee you the voters, I understand the need to get the Northern Sonoma County voters that you promised you would do that to, but the reality is it's time to realize cost benefit is a relevant criteria. It's relevant to the voters, and it's going to be relevant when the next tax extension measure is on the ballot. I can guarantee it.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you.
Next is David Gilbertson.
Hey guys, thank you for having this session. I appreciate it. And Eddie, welcome to the work there. And you know, for the previous guy, just to address some things, you know, it's funny to talk about cost benefit analysis and from that perspective, and then try to do a cost benefit analysis of what a highway costs to put in versus what rail costs. And Mr. Swearinger is exactly right. You guys have become a freight company now, and you need to take that seriously, because across America, freight is what makes rails money right now. And so you guys need to take that seriously. And that's why I'm kind of disappointed, honestly, in the abandoning of the Shellville. You know, that was easy money, having empty containers on a side rail. Whatever the board was thinking to do away with that. I know there's environmental pressure. Those people have no idea what they're talking about, obviously. To have empty propane tankers on the side rail, $500,000, down the tubes per, what was it, month? I don't know what it was. It was a good amount of money for doing really very little work.
That was annually. It was an annual number.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. But I am all in for bringing, I live in Healdsburg, and I can't wait for the train to get here. And I guarantee that when it gets built, that people are going to want to take excursions to this area because it's the darling of wine country. And there's plenty of areas to get off and move around, and you can bring your bike, and you can, us coming from Healdsburg, I'm excited to go down and use that extent to get down to the South Bay as well. And then to go over to Sioux Sun City would be amazing because you can hook up with Amtrak. I just took a trip over the mountain to Reno, visit some friends in Sparks. That's a gorgeous trip. Okay. So you've got this really good selling point of hooking up with Amtrak. Hopefully, are you guys going to do that? Are you going to be able to work timetables out with them? I know this is way in the future.
That is way in the future. We'll talk about that on the next question, but that is way in the future.
I'm dreaming here, but that's something, obviously, there's a whole bunch of things that need to be worked out, but I'm all in favor of opening up to Sioux Sun City. And I want to commend you guys for doing what you're doing, because I would love to see it work out to get all the way up to Cloverdale. I think people will, like was said before, if you build it, they will come. There's plenty of upside. The argument that it's cost prohibitive, again, is just, to me, you can maintain rail for a lot less than it costs to maintain a highway system that has to be repaved over and over again. And do we bat an eye at maintaining the roads? Nobody thinks about that. There's no cost benefit analysis. We do it because it's the price of doing business, and it's the government's job to take care of the transportation infrastructure, whether it's past people moving from place to place or moving freight from place to place. And that, our federal highway system is great, but we have a lot of taxes that pay for that through gas taxes. And by the way, when people start moving to electric cars, that tax is going away. So there's going to be a whole paradigm transformation in how we collect taxes as well. That needs to be factored in with how we're building our infrastructure north as well, and all areas of the rail. So again, thank you so much for what you guys are doing, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Next is Steve Bertelbaugh.
I forgot to mention one thing in my earlier comment, and that is that there were excursion trains that ran up north of Cloverdale, which I understand were quite profitable. Of course, they had an operating freight line to work on, but I think that ought to be factored into the overall consideration, particularly if you can run steam. There are a lot of people that just would, flock to this county if we had steam operation north of Cloverdale.
Thanks, Steve.
Next is Carolyn J.
Hi again. I had a question for the gentleman who said he drives from Cloverdale to this STS Smart Station and commutes to San Rafael. I'd like to know what his opinion is of a van pool, or even if it's an electric van pool, to make the people who are green happy, as an option to get to the Smart Station, in order to do some sort of preliminary study on, will this work for people? That's my question.
Yeah, Carolyn, we don't have this Zoom call set up so that people can talk to one another. So we'll have to table that one. Sorry.
Okay, but my other point is, the question was, what are the factors? I am not opposed or in support of extensions. I'm simply responding to what are the factors that
Got it.
should be considered. So I just wanted to be clear on that.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Next is Chris Fenton.
Hello, and thank you for taking my question. I appreciate it.
You bet.
RM3 can be held up in court for years. So I guess maybe I haven't read deep into this. Are we or is SMART looking at other potential funding sources for pushing forward? You know, we have this new infrastructure package going in. We have climate initiatives for the state and federally. I agree with a lot of the folks that have spoke earlier that the longer we wait, the higher the cost of the construction to move forward. And I do believe that utilizing freight and tourism moving north, and also that would be moving people south as well, would also be a large benefit to the SMART system.
Thank you. Appreciate that feedback. And yes, we are not sitting on our hands. We are continuing to pursue dollars for future construction projects every day.
And that's the last hand raised.
Great. Awesome. Well, we have almost exactly the same question, but we're going to change our focus to the east. So the question is, as SMART explores the potential for extensions to the east, what are the factors that should be considered? So now we're talking about the east.
First speaker is Anthony Nachor.
Well, good evening again. As I pointed out earlier, I live in Novato, so I live in between Novato downtown and Novato Hamilton stations. So basically, there are a lot of things that need to be considered when SMART goes to the east. First of all, will there be any station reconfigurations for Novato Hamilton station so that trains coming in from the east can pull in safely, while a connecting train heading south or to the north will be able to make transfers, you know, like between trains at Novato Hamilton, which is your proposed terminal station to the east. At the same time as well, this could also spark an opportunity for SMART to actually continue the train for some peak period trips from Fairfield all the way down to Larkspur as an alternative to driving along Interstate 80 for onward connections to the Larkspur Ferry to San Francisco. Number two, for transit connections, there are a lot of transit agencies that will be willing to connect to the SMART train and the Amtrak Capital Corridor at Fairfield Suisun Station. You have at least Soul Trans, Golden Gate, Marin Transit, Napa County Vine. You also have Fairfield Suisun Transit, and also Sonoma County Transit as well for Sonoma. So basically, you definitely need to work with all of those agencies plus more to create that sense of connectivity at Fairfield Suisun. I even brought this up at a at another virtual conference with Soul Trans, wherein I brought up the question of, will there be an opportunity for SMART and Amtrak to build a common station with a common platform at Suisun? Because currently the Suisun station is a one side platform, and it's already a bit of a challenge for me to access that station. So basically, once the SMART station is built, will there be a cross-platform transfer for SMART and Amtrak Capital Corridor to make quick transfers between the two modes? And most importantly, number three, I really hope that the construction for that line can be done in a way that addresses potential sea level rise, especially when Highway 37 has been deemed, precarious in terms of, sea level rise. We definitely need to make sure that SMART is ready to tackle the challenge of sea level rise by ensuring that the tracks will be high enough to continue operating service despite the fact that 37 might end up going below water. So those would be my first comments for now. I will come back later for more.
Oh, thank you. Just a quick time check. We have about 35 minutes remaining in our session. So just ask everyone to, be succinct and really want to get through all these questions because I definitely want to hear all of your feedback.
Next, we have L. Willard Richards.
Willard, are you there? Are you on mute, Willard? There you go. Willard, we can't hear you.
One thing that was considered in the Calthorpe report and the early planning for SMART was the effect of rail on future development. One criticism I hear of building passenger rail to the east to alleviate congestion on Highway 37 is that the population is so diffuse, it's hard to tell where to put the stations. There's obviously a need for a parallel transportation line on Highway 37. And when considering that, we should not neglect the effect of having a rail line would have on development. Developers would choose to put their projects near rail stations if a rail line existed. I think we have begun to see that somewhat on the SMART line. Today's Press Democrat has a big article on Rohnert Park's development right next to the rail tax.
Right.
So there are many benefits for going east. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next, we have Steve Berlebaugh.
Yes, thank you. I think it's very important that we go east and that we shoehorn our way into the SR 37 considerations. They're doing a project environmental linkages study, but they've largely left SMART out of the picture. They mention it, but they sort of shovel it off that this is just part of the Caltrans rail office responsibility and nobody else has to worry about it. So I was very happy to see the examination of this in the white paper. Again, I think freight is a big element in what's how it's going to operate with passenger. Taking trucks off of Highway 37 would substantially reduce the tie-up in traffic. And it would also reduce the maintenance cost for the road. So there are lots of reasons to be operating freight in that area. And the more you have freight, the more possibilities there are for passengers. I know you've got to schedule both of them, but it can be done.
Yep. Thanks, Steve.
So in Europe, the idea of a rolling highway, putting the trucks on trains and operating on the rails for 100-mile distances is common. And in this country, they're looking at it for 500 miles. I think we could change the picture if we put in a project and showed that you could have trucks that ride the train for 100 miles and make it profitable for the users. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next is Mike Arnold.
Once again, blowing people's balloons up. Guys, it involves a different county. It's not just the construction of passenger rail. It is the operations of passenger rail that would have to be financed. Now, that's going to require a tax initiative in Napa County. It's also going to require additional taxes in Marin and Sonoma counties to pay for it, because it adds operating costs and it won't pay for itself. Everybody knows that. And so therefore you would have to pass an additional tax to this tax extension measure. And a little political reality from someone who has beat the smart board 2 out of 3 times with the voters. If you continue this talk of the extension before you pass this tax extension measure, I believe it will feed the no vote on the next tax extension measure, because why? The public will get informed that they are planning on raising taxes even more to pay for the operations of a train that goes east, let alone that you have to get compliance with Napa County voters, which is far from assured. And realistically, given that the MTC has already taken this off the list, it's not in Plan Bay area. Let's put a stop to talking about extensions east. They don't make economic sense. They don't make political sense. Those are my comments. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Next is Chris Fenton.
Last caller also failed to mention that it's Suisun City, Solano County. I think that other transit agencies, when they extend out their service areas, they tend to tax those areas in order for them to buy in. I think it makes 100% absolute sense to move east. Rail is very popular in Europe and it works efficiently, and it's something that's going to be in the future of America if you guys want to get off of the fossil fuels. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next, we have Jack Swearingen.
I just cannot resist asking Mr. Arnold why he doesn't insist upon cost-benefit analysis of all public highways. Because if he does, he's going to lose the argument. Thank you.
Yeah, again, we don't have the ability for people to talk back and forth on here, so we'll table that one. I think you probably know how to get a hold of them if you want to ask them the question.
Next is Mike Pechner.
Well, Jack stole my thunder, but the thing about what we're talking about is sustainability, reducing the carbon footprint, and reducing greenhouse gases. And Arnold does not understand that. Thank you.
Next is Anthony Nachor.
Hi, so I would like to address the issue regarding ridership going to the east. So from what I understand, Vallejo and Fairfield and Suisun, their populations combined can be slightly, can be similar to what Marin County has overall. So I can definitely see the opportunity for SMART to tap into the large ridership bases for Fairfield and Vallejo to a point that, I understand the cost-benefit analysis issue, but at the same time, when there is enough ridership over there to Solano County, that the train service can be justified to reduce congestion along Highway 37 and in extension, potentially Interstate 80 as well, then I believe that the extension to Solano County would be a worthwhile endeavor, especially when this potential extension could also spark additional economic activity in both Solano and Napa counties, which SMART currently does not serve at the moment. So basically, I can definitely see the opportunity for SMART to go east. And, the ridership over there is already pretty ripe for train service that SMART could tap into a little bit further. If you just put in the stations right, and, and if you convince the transit agencies to actually serve their buses directly to the SMART and Amtrak stations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is James Schmidt.
Jim, I think you're on mute. There you go.
All right. I'm surprised as a KT general manager that you've hired so many quarterbacks. They're all here tonight. What was lacking in the original SMART proposal, the 70-mile promise for the system that would be built by 2013 or so, and isn't there yet, is a business case. You don't have a business case for either all the freight discussions going on, and you certainly don't have one for the extensions either east or north. The best thing you could do is do a solid scientific business case and get some expert input instead of everyone's opinion of what could or should or maybe would be possible. Until you do that, and until we get the current operating cost below $50 a passenger trip, we're in big trouble. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Next is Carolyn J.
Hi. My factors that I would want to see are, what is the commuter? Is the profile a commuter or a traveler who wants to connect to the Capitol Corridor train? Another factor I would want to know is on commute. What is the commute volume from Novato to Suisun City? Because you're not proposing any intermediate stops, I'm assuming, between Novato and Suisun City, although to me, having it go to Vallejo and to the ferry would be, an interesting deviation, but you're not proposing that. So also the opposite volume, and I think Suisun City to Novato. I have lived here for 32 years in this county. I lived in San Francisco, and then I lived in the South Bay. I struggle to think there's a lot of people coming to Novato to work from Suisun City, but I could be wrong. And I agree strongly that you need a business case analysis. You need some, not ridership, but traffic flow statistics and some employment statistics on who is working in Novato or maybe San Rafael, coming from that direction. And I also strongly agree on some sort of environmental impact, because we have seen for at least a decade that, the 37 is sinking, and that's a concern also in the east over there, that some of those are sinking down environmentally. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to share.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Next is David Gilbertson.
Hey, real quickly, I know I kind of said this before that I'm all in favor of going east. You can see the traffic on 37 if you ever driven it. It's 2 lanes. It's absolutely packed to the hill and often backed up way beyond belief. To be able to have mass transit that would be people waving to the people sitting in traffic as they're going by would be, I mean, I can't imagine that wouldn't have packed trains every time back and forth. Getting there, I know, here's something that I was thinking about, because I did see the different levels of how we would get there, the expensive model versus the cheap model. Man, I can't imagine that it would be worth sacrificing the image of the smart train to have some old diesels pushing random passenger cars. There's definitely an image that you want to project here, and smart's head and shoulders in terms of comfort and space and such over what BART has, for instance. It's not, you hear people saying that, we should have made it possible to have 4 and 5 car consists that make it actually more efficient. But, that's not what we have right now. So with what we've got, it's important to maintain an image that we have tables, we have a snack bar, and you can, sit there and drink your cup of coffee and have internet too, and with space to spare. So I think that you need to keep that. Cost is obviously an issue though, and any ways to cut costs without sacrificing that image. It just seems like we're getting charged to the hilt by these contractors. I don't know what's going on, but I push for the board to just be more careful with their negotiations, because that is also an obstacle right now, PR wise and otherwise.
Thanks, David. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And that is the last hand up right now.
Okay, just a time check. We have about 19 minutes remaining. I anticipated a lot of this conversation tonight, and that kind of leads to our third question here is, how can SMART balance the cost of extensions? That's including the capital and the operating cost with the other benefits of transit, examples being quality of life, greenhouse gas emissions, efficient land use and development, public health, other environmental benefits, and equity concerns. Do we have anybody that wants to speak on this question?
First speaker is Anthony Nachor.
Hey, so to balance the cost with the other benefits, I have been really contemplating on the idea of SMART becoming a real estate agent as well, wherein if you have additional space for retail development or housing development, similar to what BART is doing, what if SMART could also enter into the real estate business by, developing affordable housing and, businesses next to the train stations, so that, you can generate additional revenue for your train system. And in the process, you might also justify the fact that, your fare box recovery ratio could go even higher if you provide those additional services to the people. For example, if you build additional houses next to the SMART station, I know this will not be popular with some people, by the way, because this will bring up issues of density and noise and all of that. But if you provide homes to, to folks who want to commute to and from, like a Santa Rosa or, to Susun City and Fairfield, then it will provide your agency a new way to, gain revenue from, from the folks who live and from the businesses who lease, spots next to the train stations. So definitely, I really would like you to consider becoming a real estate agent and, use the additional land that you have, next to train stations, so that you can, provide additional housing and, commercial areas. And I really hope this could spark a conversation with other cities along the corridor to make sure that, SMART can increase its revenue base even further. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Next is Steve Bertelbaugh.
So yes, I wish we were back in the 1890s when the streetcar suburbs were going in. Unfortunately, we're dealing now with greenhouse gas emissions, and I think that's the issue here. We need to get cars off the roads. There are lots of reasons why, and make efficient use of the land. The interesting thing that's happening right now is that we're losing population. It didn't only happen in the areas to the north, it's happened all over Sonoma County. And there are going to be some population shifts as Marin County has to build some 11,500 units that might take care of a lot of the long distance commuting that's happening now. Again, I think the question is how you include these in your cost benefits analysis and your business case. So we got to have a big picture look at it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next is Mike Arnold.
One of the issues that I've tried to raise for 20 years are the inequities of the sales tax. I think everybody who's participating in this knows the sales tax is just about the most regressive kind of tax we have. And what that means is less affluent families and households are paying a higher proportion of their income in sales tax revenues than more affluent. You layer on top of that about how many users of the SMART train you have, and you realize, well, there's a lot of people paying for this train that aren't using the train. And then you layer on top of that most of the sales tax you pay is hidden because it is the pass-through effect from businesses that are paying sales taxes on items that they buy, and you don't see it because you might be buying a tax-exempt item like a banana at Safeway, but embedded in the price of that banana is the cost of sales taxes. It would be really good if the SMART board tackled this question forthright. I gotta say, Caltrain got a sales tax, a 1/8 sales tax passed in 3 different counties. They're deep blue. It didn't have any sway with the voters regarding its regressivity. But if equity is a concern, we should be concerned that we're taxing less affluent people to subsidize more affluent people to take the train, and what the equity issues are associated with that kind of transfer.
Thanks, Mike.
Next is David Gilbertson.
Hey there again. My first inclination when it comes to cost prohibitiveness and how to solve that problem is just to argue and to tell people that basically, the rate per mile building rail versus highway, is if you do a cost analysis, it's much cheaper to maintain rail. Rail's there for 50 years if it's not in a corner. Of course, gets different if it's higher speeds, corners and whatnot. But to maintain a highway, I want to remind people, is extremely expensive per lane. You're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars and probably 2 and 3 times what it costs to maintain. So I think that needs to be part of your PR campaign to show the cost benefits of transportation, mass transportation, and to show people, the cost of rail versus maintaining highway infrastructure. I think there's not actually a ton of good articles on the internet about this, but that might be a good use of resources to fund such a study, or at least explore such a study, because I think that that's an important point, is that you are actually saving money in the long run by maintaining this infrastructure over abusing our highways, especially with all the trucks that we have to. Now, this is giving the fact that you're going to do some freight transfer, because we need that freight line going in order to balance out the passenger end of the deal. So, and then I also had an idea of, how San Francisco almost lost their cable cars in the 80s. it took a grassroots effort to save cable cars in San Francisco. Some German immigrant lady, she was at the heart of it. I forget her name, but if you go to the Trolley Museum, you can read all about it, the Cable Car Museum. And at some point, we might want to set up some such museum that showcases, the engineering and garner support from the community to have some kind of, center, community center place where people can come and see and learn about the train history, the rail history of this region, and then how we got to where SMART is. Boy, bringing in kids and families and a little model railroad layout and that kind of thing. They have a little bit something like that in Santa Rosa, but making a little more out of that might be a really big public relations go. You know what I'm saying?
Got it.
So,
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Next is Chris Fenton.
I'll make this short. I was thinking about this question about balancing the costs, and I'm sure that it's been milled over by SMART, but I know you don't do as much of this yet, but potentially in the future, design, build, operate, maintain freight spurs for transfer hubs. I was looking at also potential contract freight with large entities, U.S. Postal Service, to bring their mail into the Bay Area type of thing. And then one final thing was, I know that these are diesel units. I don't know if you guys have thought about going into a purchasing consortium with other transit agencies in the area and dropping your bulk fuel prices and other items such as that. Thank you.
Thank you. Good feedback. Thanks.
Next is Carolyn J.
Hi, I'd like to respond to the cost of extension compared to other benefits of transit. I think to overcome some of the people who voted against your last measure, and I'm going to do full disclosure that I was one of them. And the reason I voted against it was because of the pathways not being clearly communicated about, at least in my experience. I love the train, but I think if you want to get environmental factors for your extensions, I'm wondering if you can build those pathways. I think that was the previous call I was on, where someone said, can you get the pathway to Healdsburg so that people can start to see progress? I understand there's some private, I believe it's residents from Santa Rosa North all the way to STS that are blocking the pathway, which I'm a bit puzzled about because I thought that was part of the right of way of your train, opposition to pathway. So I think until you can get these immediate green benefits resolved, you are going to have little benefit to people who have become disheartened with the greenway, which is very prominent across the United States. I've cycled with all different states, all over, East Coast, Midwest, and our greenway system in California is deficient. Anybody who thinks it's on par with the rest of the United States should contact me, because it's not. I mean, there's greenways that go all the way across the state of Missouri, east to west. If we want to build confidence, I think you have to resolve that pathway issue, because the average person, when you look at the poverty rates, they range from 12% to like 6% in our top Sonoma County cities. And if you want people to use this, you have to make it accessible to all income levels. And the pathways, in my opinion, is the start. If you want to bring tourists up here, get some greenways, get some e-bikes at some of the stations, get some Lime bikes, something. I see this down in the East Bay. I see it in San Francisco. I don't see anything like that happening here. So that might be a way to promote the greenness of the SMART train. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Do we have any more?
Next is Barry Busowitz.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to get a chance here. Excuse me, I gotta fix my audio. Sorry. I apologize. Jeez. I'm sorry. I hope. Jeez. Okay. I won't take long. I just heartily encourage you to complete and build the bikeways, pathways for active transportation in the places we have the smart train now, as well as extensions. I think you lost a lot of enthusiasm about the vote for the tax because of not having the bike paths, promoted. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
And that is the last hand raised.
Okay, last question on this one. And again, we're taking very good notes, so we don't need to repeat things that have already been said. But what other concerns or ideas do you have regarding smart extensions?
First is Anthony Nachor.
Hey, so I would like to come back to the idea, that I floated earlier regarding, Mendocino Transit Authority connecting to the smart train currently in Santa Rosa. So basically, the next idea that I can float to you is, I would like to pedal. I would like to work with the other people here who have said, okay, can there be a future extension of the smart train further up to Mendocino County, potentially to serve Ukiah, but as a revival of a long, a long forgone train service that went up, to the Redwoods. So basically, if Smart, could bring up that idea of reviving that train service further up to Mendocino County, which will involve, of course, another tax referendum for Mendocino County voters, then that could further spark tourism opportunities up along Highway 101 to a point that, tourists from San Francisco could eventually do day trips up to Mendocino County rather than being stuck in places like Marin or Sonoma counties. And that will also hopefully provide additional revenue for Smart by bringing in tourists who want to go further up the line. And I really hope that will be, a way for you to, hopefully revive service along the North Coast Railroad, which has been, a lifelong dream for me, living here in Northern California for many years now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised.
Awesome. Well, we have 2 minutes remaining. I only have one question left, and if we, this is our third listening session that we've done. We have one more. Does anybody have any advice as to how to improve on these sessions moving forward? Any hands?
I would be, this is Jack.
Hey, Jack.
Engine. I would be overjoyed to get a synopsis of what you've learned from these listening sessions. I know they're for internal consumption, and because you're planning to build a better railroad and a bigger one and a more profitable one, or a profitable one. But this dialogue is fascinating to me, and I'd be delighted to get inside your head and see how you're responding to any of them. I know that's more work, and I can't ask you to do that because you do plenty. But I would think that the public could see how this is all digested into key points that were made by the public. I think it would entice the public to get more involved. They'd feel like part of the solution.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jack. And everybody's going to see this all play out because all of this is going to be part of our strategy moving forward. This information is going to be reported back to the board, the positive feedback, the negative feedback. Like I said, I truly believe all feedback is good. And I think that we have to look at this from all angles. It may be some things that have been said here tonight people don't like to hear, but the bottom line is we have to think about all of these things as we find our way as we move forward. Are there any other comments out there, IT?
Next, we have Steve Bertelbaugh.
Steve?
Yes, I would really like to be able to see the other people that are in this conversation. When you have 400 people, it's kind of hard to do, but the size of these seems to be at the point where you could do it. At least it'd be nice to see the person who's talking about her, an idea or making a contribution.
Okay, thank you. That's good feedback. We'll look at that. Anything
Next,
else? Oh,
next is Carolyn J.
okay.
Hi again. You have a lot of wall space on your train, and people have a lot of time sitting on the train. Have you thought about doing these surveys with some of these great questions you have by putting them on the train while you're collecting this for your strategic plan and making it easy for people who are sitting on the train to do these surveys, or even having people perhaps roaming the train with a paper survey that somebody could do very quickly. You know, you have a lot of good questions in your survey, but I don't think the word's getting out. I ran into someone yesterday at an organization who saw my T-shirt, and she said, "Oh, you ride the SMART?" And I said, "Yes." And she said she loved SMART, and she didn't know anything about these sessions. And she said she's on the newsletter, but I think the perhaps, you know, there's only a few things you can put at the top, but
Right.
There's just a lot of people, and I've been wearing my shirt getting good comments. So
Awesome.
that's the thing. I guess I'll have to send those
Thank
back.
you. Thank
Bye.
you. Right.
Next is Anthony Nachor.
Okay.
Well, Eddie, thank you for hosting this session. And I really find this very helpful that you have these series of listening sessions for, for the month of April. But I really hope that, for the next listening sessions like this, I really hope that you provide, you do like a monthly listening session wherein you actually listen to the riders and those who might want to ride SMART, so that, you get to listen to their concerns about the system and eventually reach out to them and give them an opportunity to to understand where they come from and give them and a platform to voice their voice their desires to make the service even better. As a transportation planner myself, I really am supportive with SMART's extension plans, but at the same time I really think that, as you already said in the SWOT analysis earlier, you still have issues reaching out to to riders and to potentially nonprofit organizations or schools or whatever. So we definitely need to have these listening sessions once a month. Coming from you as a new GM, I definitely would like you to be the voice for the SMART trade, and definitely your presence now really reassures us riders and as transit advocates that you are there to listen to what we as riders really want and need to make your service even better. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony.
Next is Chris Fenton.
Yeah, Eddie, thank you for hosting these. I really appreciate the time to speak with you on these matters. I think that some of the feedback that you're receiving, I think that would be personally helpful to see these as action items within your objectives in your business plan. And then, I know that those are usually short and succinct, but maybe it's, service users provided, some of these items for these actions, something along that line.
Very good. Thank you.
Next is James Schmidt.
I would offer two comments. I think there is a role for a continuing, for lack of a better word, a public sounding board that might be an adjunct to the management and the board to have a forum for discussions of this sort. But the other thing that strikes me is we surely should recognize that these by no means substitute as a polling or a scientific survey of community thought. You get interested people, you have people with an axe to grind or vested interest in a service at a given hour, a given location. They're likely to be here. Much of the community is not. And your broader community is silent to your decision making. It'd be well to try to rectify that with some good work and measuring what the public really thinks. Thanks much.
Thanks, Jim.
Next is Jack Swearingen.
Jack, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. I actually intended to lower my hand a bit ago.
Got it.
I just think that in all cost benefit analyses, like all systems analyses, you get the answer you want by selecting your own boundary conditions. And almost every system analysis I've ever seen has been predetermined by the selecting of what we're going to study and what we're going to assess. And so I appeal to those who want business cases and cost benefit analyses and all the rest to include some of these externalities, which are very, very big and not necessarily monetized. Just because they can't be monetized does not mean they're not important. So I appeal to all cost benefit analyses and all such studies that we look and come to consensus on what should be included in the study, rather than just somebody's wishes to put in and take out of the study. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Next, we have Richard Gregory Johnson.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. My question. I have more of a practical comment at this point, and I'll start off by saying that I'm a public policy professor at the University of San Francisco, and I live in West Petaluma. So I am in total support of Smart Train. I was very excited when the service got going, but for me, it's such a hassle to take because I have to drive from West Petaluma to the Petaluma station and then take the train to the ferry and then take the ferry into San Francisco, and then from San Francisco downtown get up to the campus of the University of San Francisco. So so I just throw that out there as something that other folks may be dealing with, just the issue of, that they want to participate in ridership with Smart Train, but it's so demanding to get to the train, and then after the train, you have to find other ways to get to your destination in San Francisco. So I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Next, we have Jack Swearingen.
Jack, did you mean to raise your hand?
Obviously, something's goofy with my hand
Okay.
raised. I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's
I
no
meant to have
problem.
it down.
No problem. We done, IT?
Looks like we're done.
Okay. Well, I'll wrap this up, just talk about our next step. Obviously, we're at the stage right now where we're soliciting public feedback, doing listening sessions. As you can see, the grayed out areas, we've completed ridership, completed pathways, we've completed extensions as of tonight. And next week, on April 27th at 6:30 p.m., we will be doing our freight listening session. From here, and there's been some talk about this tonight, is what happens, with this information you're getting. We're going to use this information to develop our goals that are aligned with our objectives. This will be a public process. This will be something that we're going to report what we've heard to our boards, and and then we'll start to develop these goals. Goals will be rolled into our strategies. And then obviously, the one part that we don't want to forget is that monitoring performance. We have to establish some KPIs. We have to establish our baselines and make sure that we're actually achieving what we set out to achieve. And then if we make mistakes, if something doesn't work out exactly the way we planned, we'll adjust as required. And obviously, everything that we're doing is focused on achieving our desired results. Again, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. This is very helpful for me and staff that are on here. It's going to be helpful for our board. Many of them are on here tonight as well, listening in. And so again, I just want to thank you. I appreciate it. And everybody have a great night. See you later.